I was very, very shy to speak Korean, and now I am really confident in Korean and not shy to speak at all. That process, those, let's say 4 years that it took me to reach a confident speaking level in Korean, took me about 1.5 to 2 years in Japanese. Why would that be? Why did I learn Japanese so much faster than I did Korean? Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Lindie if you haven't met me before, and I love languages. Today we're talking about how long it takes you to get to fluency, to learn a language. I've been asked this question quite a lot recently, like, hey, how long did it take you to learn Korean? Or, hey, how long did it take you to learn Japanese? I don't think it's possible to learn a language to fluency in a certain amount of time. Nobody has the same language learning skills, techniques, background. There are some people online who claim to be able to learn a language to fluency, to become fluent in a language within 3 or 4 months. I think you may or may not know who I am talking about. I don't think that is possible. I wish it were. I would be like way past fluency in Hungarian if it was just 3 months. No way, not possible. Me saying I've learned Korean for 10 years and someone else saying they've learned Korean for 10 years, we might not be nearly at the same level because one of us may or may not have put in more time, one of us may or may not have lived in Korea, one of us may or may not listen to Korean music, watch Korean dramas, be immersed with a language, and the other person could just, learn from a book and go to classes and not hear that language all the time. So definitely immersion plays a big role here. I think it takes so long to really get down to native pronunciation in a language, and pronunciation really helps you sound a lot more fluent than you may or may not be. So just learning pronunciation in a tricky language takes a very long time. It took me about 1.5 to 2 years to feel confident in my pronunciation of Korean. And when I talk to people on the phone, some people eventually started saying, oh my gosh, I thought you were Korean, or you sound completely Korean. That took a number of years to sound native in Korean. And if I know all the grammar structures and all the vocab in Korean and my pronunciation is still terrible, I'm not going to sound or be fluent, right? So there's a lot of factors at play. It is very, very difficult to define what fluency is and what it's not. Alright, I'm not going to talk about English and Afrikaans because I grew up bilingual, so I will start with French. French is a very tricky one because I started learning French around grade 2 when I lived in Pakistan, and then I took it in Dubai at school from like 4th until 9th grade, in South Africa from grade 9 until grade 12. So French was always a school language for me, but once I finished high school, I didn't have the time to take French at university, and my French has just gotten very, very weak. So I don't think you can measure how long someone's learned a language with fluency. Those are not correlating. So if you count, like let's say I started with French in 2nd grade and I took it up until 12th grade, that is 10 years of French. That does not mean I speak French like a 10-year-old French native, because I'm not immersed in the language. I don't live in France, I don't live in a francophone country, and I haven't been practicing since I left high school. And some people who have learned French for 2 years are way past my level because they put time and effort into it. Okay, let's move on to Korean. So I've been learning Korean since 2009. That is almost 10 years, so the same as French, but at different time periods in my life. And I am way more fluent in Korean than I am in French because of immersion, the time and effort I put into learning Korean. I'm always texting on katok in Korean, I read Korean books, I listen to Korean music every day. So just hearing the language and using it every day has made my Korean go like this, while my French kind of goes like that. So I guess I've learned them for the same amount of time, but I put way more effort into Korean. Then the interesting thing is when we get to Japanese. Alright, here's the funny thing. So I think I got to the same level of fluency in Japanese than I got to in Korean, but in a way shorter time period. So sometimes you'll discover that you've been learning a language for 5 years and someone's been learning it for 2 years and they are way more fluent than you. It's because of immersion and how much exposure they have to the language. And of course, if you learn a bunch of other languages on the side, you're not dedicating so much time to one language, whereas one person would be learning a single language to a level of fluency and you are dabbling in a lot of languages, which is not a bad thing, but the time it takes to reach a fluent, whatever that means, level in those languages is a bit slower than it does if you're just learning one. In any case, that aside, so I think I got to a comfortable Korean speaking level in about 2 to 4 years of learning Korean. I was very, very shy to speak Korean. I was too scared to even say 안녕하세요 to the shop owner at the Korean store. And now I am really confident in Korean and not shy to speak at all. That process, those, let's say 4 years that it took me to reach a confident speaking level in Korean, took me about 1.5 to 2 years in Japanese. Why would that be? Why did I learn Japanese so much faster than I did Korean? So as you may or may not know, my parents lived in Japan for 4 years, and even though I couldn't go with them because I was studying in South Africa, I used to visit them for about 2 months at a time, twice a year. So let's say that, I mean, it was over December and the June-July holidays, so that would be, let's say 1.5 months times 2 would be 3 months a year, times 4 is 12 months. So I spent a cumulative amount of, let's say 1 year over the span of 4 years in Japan. Because I was so motivated to learn Japanese because my parents were there and I had this opportunity to be forced to use the language twice a year, I put so much effort into my Japanese. Korean was more of a fun journey, something I did as a hobby, and that's why it took me a number of years to get to a confident level of fluency. Whereas with Japanese, I seriously had this goal. I wanted to be fluent. I wanted to work in a Japanese company. And it is quite hard to get by with only English in Japan. So I was forced to use Japanese, and that pushed me to learn Japanese a lot harder. My dad used to bring home newspapers. I think it was the Japan Times from his work, and they had a section in the middle for Japanese learners, and it would teach you kanji and grammar and basic phrases and stuff. And he'd always photocopy the paper for me and bring it home for me. So I always had this constant input of Japanese around me. So living in South Africa, which is a predominantly English-speaking country, I was not surrounded by Korean as much, which is why it took me a bit longer to be fluent in Korean. It was also easier for me actually to learn Japanese because I had learned Korean first, and the grammar structures and some vocabulary are very similar. So the time it took me in Korean to learn that the particles iga and un, those like topic markers and subject markers, we don't have them in English or Afrikaans or French. It was very confusing for me. I was like, why do you have this? But that time it took me to figure out that, I didn't have that in Japanese because I was like, oh, okay, it's just like Korean, got it. Within 1 minute, I understood why you have particles in Japanese, whereas it took me a few months in Korean to wrap my head around it. So the more languages you learn, especially within the same language body, the same language family, the easier it gets. So I'm not going to go into detail about all my other languages. Like for example, Hungarian, I started learning around November last year. It is almost November this year, and I really haven't improved because I haven't been putting effort into it. And Japanese is more important for me now because I'm writing the JLPT. So it is so difficult to answer the question, how long did it take you to learn XYZ language? Because in summary, I'm still learning. Every language is different depending on your native language as well. So all in all, sorry I'm not able to answer your question. I don't know. It is very, very different for each language. I don't know how long it takes me to learn a language because I am still learning. Well, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'd love to hear what your opinions are. Do you think you can get fluent in a language in a certain amount of time? Or is there a certain time frame that everyone has to learn any language? I don't know. Leave your thoughts below. Thank you for watching and see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!